Hello students. So today in this session I will define you your first activity that you are supposed to do. So activity is generation of startup idea. But before you move on to this session, I would request you, if you have not gone through the previous session of how to generate the right startup idea, please go through that first and then come back to this activity session. So we have understood in the previous session that what all successful entrepreneurs that we see today, we have went in their history and identified the trigger points when they realized that there is something like this could be built, right? So we have learned how did that ideas came into the minds of successful entrepreneurs as seen today. So we have understood the journey of Amazon, Oyo, Paytm, LinkedIn, Flipkart, Uber, Netflix, Google, Dropbox, WhatsApp, Redbus, and then Swiggy. So all these companies that you see today, their founders, when they started, what was that moment when they got an idea about startup? So we understood the source of that moment in the previous session, and we identified that there are three major sources for any startup founder to get an idea from. Number one source is the knowledge and the experience. Based on the knowledge and experience of the startup founder himself or herself in a particular sector will trigger those ideas of starting a startup in that sector. Second source would be the problems. The founders have faced themselves, face the problems, and the problems could serve as a source of starting a startup then, because then they realize, okay, can we contribute this situation, can we help, can we solve the problem? Because if I have faced the problem, which means there are many people like me who face the same problem, and then they are also required a solution. And the third major source would be improving the existing services and products. So look around you and try to see what are existing in this world today, and are there any chances where we can improve any of the product or services, and do I have the large enough opportunity for me to capture the market? So this three bucket would give you the understanding, and we have seen many startup being successful in any of these buckets, right? And depending on the startup founder who got this idea, they have fallen in these three buckets, and we have understood why these companies will fall in this particular bucket in the previous session, right? So all of these companies that we see today have started their journey, and their source of idea generation was either of these three buckets. So what you have to do as an activity: first, we will choose a bucket of solving your own problem. First, what we will do is you will sit down together, take a pen and a paper, and list down all those problems which you have faced in your life, be it in your education, be it in your in your traveling, or either handling with the people, whatever it is. Maybe you went to some movie, or maybe you went to an entertainment park, wherever you went. If you felt that there is any problem that you have faced yourself, list down all of those. Don't try to judge the problem at the moment, whether it is big or small, how big or how small it is. See, our brain works this way. There are two halves of the brain, left brain and a right brain. One of the part of the brain is used for brainstorming purpose, idea generation. Other part is more logical brain. And our system is such that psychologically or intrinsically, one brain can only be active at one point of time. So when you're brainstorming, when you are generating an idea, when you are listing on the ideas, don't try to evaluate those, right? Just keep them aside, just write it down, and then move on to the next idea. So list down all the problems that you have faced, irrespective of how big the problem was and how small the problem was, right? Then first you write down all the problems that you have faced. Then introspect the life of your closed ones, your mom, your dad, your parents, your friends, your relatives, brother, sister, uncle, child. Try to observe their life and try to understand whether they have faced any problem in their life or not. Try to list down all of those, right? Then what you will do? You keep on listing this problem, right? And then from those problems, you will identify what can be done, but just keep on listing that. Second category would be improving existing product and services. Now enlist the domain where you would like to contribute. So many a times there are sectors or areas which are close to your hearts. So let's say for me, education is close to my heart. So I always look at what can I do best in the education sector. How can I improve the learning in school education? How can I improve learning in higher education, right? So try to identify those areas of your own and then identify the opportunity of improving product services in that particular sector. So first fix the area, then look at into that sector what is happening and where you can improve anything in that area, and then identify opportunity. You can also identify opportunity of removing middlemen. Middlemen in this country is very big problem, right? So whenever you identify an opportunity of removing middlemen, e-commerce are the same thing that has happened now, right? So maybe you can think of that thing. Third category, domain and knowledge and experience, right? So here you need to, as you identified your own domain where you're interested in, try to identify opportunity of startup based on that. So if you are a healthcare student, if you are a medical student, if you are a pharmacy student, try to see in your own domain. If you're an engineering student, try to see in your own domain what is currently happening and are there any opportunities for me to identify, solve and build a startup over it or not. So these are the three major buckets which we already saw. I'll give you another bonus bucket, which is existing startup in different geography. Try to understand what is happening in different part of the world and try to see whether are there any startups which are successful in that territory, in that area, and understand those startups. If it inspires you, if it motivates you, try to understand whether replicating the same model which is successful somewhere else in the Indian context, in the Indian user base, will it work or not? If yes, how? If no, what else can be made changes to it so that it works? See, the idea of Flipkart actually came from that only. You see, already Amazon was existing, but then in Indian context, if you want to introduce the marketplace, you have to give an option of COD, right? So maybe you can identify a startup operating successfully in other part of the globe and can solve a local problem that is happening here, and you can think of duplicating the same model here in Indian context. There is also another opportunity of building startup in this space, but only point will be you have to execute it in a much better way, because somebody, a founder in European countries, they know their customers well, but from an Indian perspective, you know your customers well, so you know what design will help them, what kind of product will help your user to attract more. So that's a bigger area of identifying the startup ideas. So these are the four major things. Now, as I said, you list down all those areas. You list down the problems, you list down the opportunities of improvement in services, you list down the areas where you feel your knowledge can be helpful, you list down the successful startup where you feel, is working somewhere else and you want to execute here. Once you list down everything, and I will tell you, it's not just listing down 1, 2, or 3. List down all the problems that you identify. It should not be less than 150. Push your brain. You have to go beyond 150 problems. That's where you will try to see problems around you and nearby you, right? Push yourself, not less than 150, right? Then once you have listed more than 150 problems, sit down in a silent place, pick one problem at a time, try to understand whether this problem is genuinely at a larger scale or not, or is it worth solving or not. Try to understand this, how big the problem is, whether you should involve your time in solving that. Are you motivated enough to get into this solution? So I didn't judge the problem statement one by one, and either you select the problem or you reject the problem. So take one at a time, see which one are worth solving, you tick them right, the ones which are not worth solving for you, you tick them wrong, and do the process for entirely more than 150, all the problems that you have listed, more than 150, right? And do this process periodically. So let's say in the first run, when you ran from one problem to 150 problems, and you have identified, okay, there are 30 problems which you feel can be solved. Then again do the same process for 30 problems, and you came down to 25. Again do the same for 25, you came down to 20. And then you keep on doing this. I want you to select top 15 problems, 15, from the list of 150. From the list which you feel is worth solving and there is a scope of building and innovative solutions for the same. You select top 15, and in the next session we will see how you can select that one problem or that one idea from those 15 which you have selected are worth solving, and then start working on that one problem. So we'll see that in the next session, but this is an activity which you need to perform. I hope you will do it with utmost sincerity and commitment. Thank you so much. Believe me, you will get good results at the end of this activity.